Alright, my name is Nick Capaldini, and this is my review of fieldwork assignment number 2 for Anthropology 161. And this fieldwork assignment is called Interviews, and it's me answering questions on the interviews we did in class on Thursday. So, about interviewing and being interviewed. How did the interview questions influence the information gathered? So for me, the questions we gave and were given to us very much affected the direction that we went for our interview. I think that it really shaped the entire thing. Had a different question been asked, it would have been a completely different interview and very, very different. If it wasn't such a deep question, I don't think it would have given you so much insight into the person you're interviewing and into kind of reflecting from that of yourself, listening to them, and kind of comparing yourself, their upbringing to your upbringing, and their view of gender to your view of gender, and how everything has been shaped. And I really enjoyed, actually, how deep and thought-provoking the question was. I really enjoyed it. What was the experience of being interviewed like? For me being interviewed, I felt it was really put on the spot for me. I didn't really get much time at all to think about a good answer to the question. I showed up late to class, unfortunately, so I just didn't have time to brainstorm a good answer. So as soon as I was asked, I had to think about it right away and just go for it. I did like what I came up with, though, and I think it was a good reflection. It was not what I'm used to, though. I'm not used to being put on the spot like that. I like having time to think about answers. That's what made it a nice change, though. A good change of pace. So, what was the experience of interviewing like? I actually really enjoyed getting to interview Meg. I got to know her a lot better. She was, I don't know, you have kind of a first impression of someone, and for me, at least, my first impression, I had kind of a first impression of her, and then I got to interview her, and I got to know her a lot better, actually, and kind of understand who she is as a person, who she isn't, what she values, what shapes her values, just all from hearing about her gender, and how her gender identity and how her view of gender identity is formed, which I thought was really interesting, because it's something I never really think about. But by talking about it, I learned a lot about her, and I think she learned a lot about me. So I thought that was really interesting. Kind of comparing and contrasting what she had to say with what I know about myself. Have you conducted a formal interview before? Yes, I actually have. Not an audio interview, though. Just a formal interview for an entrepreneurship class in the business school. BA 199. I got to interview my friend Chance, who's an aspiring entrepreneur, and just talk about his ideas and his aspirations and kind of what he wants to do with his life and how he wants to start his own business. All about that. The biggest difference between that interview and this one was that there was no audio recording. And after doing this whole assignment, I think had I done an audio recording with my interview, it would have been much better for that class, and I would have gotten much more content and been able to more accurately portray what it was that my friend was telling me and everything that he was saying, what he was trying to explain, very in-depth, and then I wouldn't have to worry about getting his exact quotes on the spot, writing it down. I could go back and write down all the quotes, take care of all that. Just focus on the content because I know I can go back to the recording. That was really nice in terms of this interview. Did the equipment affect the content of the interview? If so, how? If not, why not? Yes, I think the voice recorder helped so much to this interview experience. I think had I not had a voice recorder for this interview, it would have been completely different. I would have been thinking all about writing down everything that my partner was saying. I wouldn't have gotten half of what I had gotten in this interview and out of the interview from listening back to the recording. And I think it was a very positive thing. There is the whole thing about knowing you're being recorded and thinking about that. But for me, it's not all that different from talking to someone you don't know, you know? You're trying to make a good impression and thinking about what you're saying consciously to try to portray yourself in the best light in the most accurate way you can. And I don't think the voice recorder did anything that bad. One thing that could be done to improve it, though, would be to maybe have video at the same time. That's what I was thinking about. Maybe see their expressions while they were thinking about certain topics and while they were talking about maybe their upbringing or about certain parts of gender and gender identity. I think that would have been very interesting. Because, yes, you can get a lot from their vocal tone and how they explain things, how they go about things, but I think facial expressions do tell a lot, and I think that gives important information that you can't always get from a transcript. About transcribing, coding, and analyzing. How did transcribing affect the analysis? Well, I revisited the interview to look back at the phrasing, and that the biggest thing I noticed was, the phrasing, how she explained things. I interviewed Meg, and one thing I really didn't notice at all when I was interviewing her, and I did notice a lot when I went back to the audio file, was how she explained her transgender friend and her gay friend that she'd known since she'd grown up. I thought it was really interesting how she explained the past tense different from the present tense. So she had a transgender friend, and when she was describing growing up with this individual, she described him as a he, and then when she was talking about him in the present tense, she described this individual as a she. That was one thing that just went completely over my head when I was interviewing her live, and then when I went back to the audio file and was typing it, that's the biggest thing that stuck out to me. Just her kind of conscious or unconsciously, looking at him differently in her head and then explaining that. Kind of two different sides of him, but the person is still the same person to her. And I thought that was really interesting. What codes did you use and why? The biggest codes I used were schools and family. And they were also the themes that arose the most in the transcripts. Yes, I did use other ones, but those were definitely the most prominent, by far. And I think that's because that's really the time you spend the most with. You spend the vast majority of your very young life with your parents growing up, and then after that you spend the majority of your time in school learning. And I think that really does shape who you are and your identity as a person. Not just gender, but overall. I think that's one of the biggest things I got from this. What can and cannot be learned from ethnographic interviews? For me, the thing that can be learned is the interview's perspective on their answers to your questions. Kind of how they think, what they think is their best answer to your question. But maybe someone who knows them doesn't think that that's a good answer, would be a good answer to describe their upbringing or their whatever. Maybe they would disagree with the person being interviewed. You know, there are two sides to every story. And I think that's really kind of interesting to think about. And that's it. All right.